Have you ever heard of a simple plumbing job that triggered a stampede of plumbers all clamoring at the door? In this story, that unbelievable moment becomes the catalyst for an unexpected bond between a down-to-earth plumber and an otherworldly visitor in the midst of her cosmic mating season. From quantum pipes and glowing water to surprising pheromone mishaps, every twist raises the stakes higher. Want to know how our unlikely couple handles it all while juggling everyday life in New Jersey? Stick around to find out. If you enjoy captivating sci-fi romances and comedic adventures, please subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring you more tales that merge the mundane and the marvelous. Don't miss out. Listen to the full story to uncover its heartwarming conclusion. Parker Nicholson let out a weary sigh as he slid out from under Miss Garrity's kitchen sink, wiping a smear of grease from his forehead with the back of his hand. It had been one of those afternoons where every single job felt like a test of endurance. A tangle of cat hair, food scraps, and congealed soap scum had gunked up the drain, and he'd spent half an hour wrestling with it, listening to Ms. Garrity ramble on about her nephew's soccer league. He was used to it. After nearly a decade as one of the most dependable plumbers in New Jersey, Parker had long since discovered that half the job was talking to people who had better things to do with their day than fuss over a clogged pipe. Still, he managed a friendly smile and reminded her to take it easy on the cat hairs next time. Truth be told, Parker didn't really mind these calls. They were the bread and butter of Nicholson's Plumbing Solutions, a small business he'd built after inheriting his father's van and tool set. His dad, who had also been a plumber, taught him that every pipe told a story. The corroded hardware in old Victorian houses, the slick PVC lines in modern condos, even the hidden labyrinth of pipes in the city's underground. Parker took pride in solving problems that most people found too disgusting or too complicated. It gave him a sense of purpose, of continuity with his father's legacy. Parker gathered up his gear, double-checked that Ms. Garrity's sink was draining properly, and promised to send her the invoice by email. He glanced at his phone, noticing 2 more jobs on the docket, simple maintenance calls in the neighboring town. The day was dragging on, but at least the end was in sight. He pictured his modest apartment, mentally taking stock of the leftover pizza waiting in the fridge. A dull ache settled in his shoulders. He really needed a break, or at least a few hours to decompress. Maybe he'd even pop open a beer and watch some late-night sci-fi reruns on cable, though he did that more often than he cared to admit. As he tossed his wrenches and plumber's snake into the back of his trusty old van, the phone buzzed with a number he didn't recognize. Normally, Parker might have let such a call go to voicemail. Over the last few months, spam calls had become a plague, hawking extended warranties or obscure insurance scams. But work was work, and times were tight. He couldn't afford to miss a genuine emergency. His tone automatically shifted into business mode as he answered, "Nicholson's Plumbing? This is Parker. How can I help you?" The voice that came through the speaker made him pause. It was a woman's voice. No, not exactly a woman's voice. There was something extraordinary about it, a kind of soft, melodic lilt that reminded him of wind chimes made of crystal. He couldn't quite place the accent, but it was hypnotic, almost musical. She introduced herself as Rylara and explained that she had an urgent situation with her pipes that simply couldn't wait. Her choice of words and the way she said urgent made a strange shiver travel up Parker's spine. He tried to ignore the sudden warmth in his cheeks and kept his tone as professional as possible, asking her to detail the issue. Instead of describing any typical plumbing disaster, a broken sump pump, a collapsed drain, a leaking toilet, Rylara spoke in vague, suggestive terms that made Parker wonder if this call was some kind of prank. The more Rylara spoke, the more Parker found himself captivated by her voice. It had that mesmerizing quality, like a lullaby woven from midnight and moonlight. She mentioned that she'd discovered his services on a review site, praising his 5-star rating and the wide range of tasks he claimed to handle. "Your profile says you tackle any emergency no matter how late," she purred, stretching out the words in a marks that felt both alluring and disorienting. Parker forced himself to focus and scribble down the details. An address in a newly developed area on the outskirts of Cherry Hill. He'd heard of the place, where wealthy tech entrepreneurs built minimalist mansions with complicated architectural designs. Though the paychecks were sometimes good, Parker had always felt out of place on those upscale calls. He associated them with overly fussy homeowners who rarely lifted a finger to fix anything themselves. Still, work was work. He confirmed he could be there within the hour and quickly finished cleaning up at Ms. Garrity's place. As he set his GPS for the address Relara provided, a tiny voice in the back of his mind teased him for feeling a flutter of nervous excitement. She just sounded so different, so magnetic. "Get a grip," he muttered, turning the key in the ignition. "It's just another job." Yet, no matter how he tried to rationalize it, there was something undeniably intriguing about Relara's call. The drive took him from the humble residential blocks of central New Jersey into increasingly manicured suburbs, each neighborhood looking a little more like a designer's dream. Modern steel and glass facades replaced the traditional brick and vinyl siding. Perfectly trimmed hedges and glowing automated lighting lined the wide roads. Finally, his GPS chimed. He had arrived. The house, or perhaps compound was a better word, before him was like something out of a futuristic movie. It had curving, iridescent walls that caught the fading sunlight, reflecting soft ribbons of color across the spotless driveway. There was no visible front door. Instead, the entire front wall appeared to be a single seamless sheet of glass, or some material that shimmered with a faint luminescence. Parker parked his van carefully, feeling suddenly self-conscious about his muddy tires and the battered toolboxes in the back. He doubted the homeowners association would appreciate scuffed asphalt, but there was nothing he could do about it now. As he stepped out, he felt as though he were under the scrutiny of invisible cameras. He picked up his tool belt and stared at the sleek exterior, trying to spot a doorbell or a button. Before he could find anything, the wall slid open with a soft hiss, reminiscent of high-tech airlocks in sci-fi series. Suddenly, he felt like an intruder in some classified research facility. Standing at the threshold was Relara, although nothing about her matched what Parker would consider ordinary. She was tall, easily 6 feet, maybe more, with lean, graceful proportions. Her skin was tinted a pale shade of emerald, catching the light in a subtle glow that made her appear almost ethereal. Her eyes, winsome and luminous, seemed to shift colors, sometimes green, sometimes gold, sometimes a mixture of both. Silken hair that looked water-suspended framed her face, drifting around her shoulders with a life of its own. Parker froze, nearly dropping his tool belt. He'd seen some strange setups in high-end homes, secret passages, automated faucets, even a rotating living room once. But he had never encountered a person who seemed not entirely human. His heart thudded in his chest as Relara smiled warmly, revealing a row of teeth that were too perfect, too symmetrical, to be standard issue. "You must be Parker Nicholson," she said, her voice that same melodic tone that had captivated him over the phone. "Come in. I've been expecting you." For a moment, Parker struggled to formulate a coherent thought. If this was a prank, it was elaborately staged. He didn't know whether to be alarmed, enchanted, or both. Finally, years of professional habit kicked in. He managed a stiff nod, clearing his throat as he stepped into the pristine foyer. Yes, I'm here about your plumbing issues?" Rylara's eyes glimmered with something. Amusement, maybe curiosity. "Yes, my pipes require servicing, and I'm confident you're precisely the right professional for the job." The way she said servicing made Parker's cheeks flare red. He was grateful that the interior lighting of the house was dimmer, though it had a peculiar shifting quality, changing colors along the high walls and ceiling. He couldn't tell if it was an artistic choice or some advanced technology. The floor was smooth underfoot, almost frictionless. He followed her deeper inside, taking in the bizarre architecture. It reminded him of the set designs from old sci-fi movies, but rendered with modern polish. Curved corridors, translucent walls that revealed glimpses of hidden rooms, and furniture that looked grown rather than built. A strange hum reverberated through the space like a low-level electronic pulse. Parker realized his own heart was racing in time with it. They reached a room that Relara identified as the bathroom, though it looked nothing like any bathroom Parker had ever seen. There was a large basin carved from a material that resembled crystal. But as he stepped closer, he noticed subtle channels of light coursing through it. Were those tiny lines glowing? The shower stall was an arched tube of glass, rimmed with shimmering filaments that radiated faint pulses in different colors. Everything seemed alive, as if the house itself was a living organism. Rylara stood close, very close, and motioned toward the basin. "Please inspect the pipes beneath," she said softly. "I believe there's a problem with the flow." Parker swallowed, forcing himself to lower into a crouch and peer into the cabinet underneath. His flashlight revealed a network of smooth, iridescent tubes that glowed from within, channeling what looked like water, but might have been something else entirely. This definitely wasn't standard PVC or metal. It was almost organic, pulsing gently as though it had a heartbeat. He tested for leaks, for pressure, irregularities, and even put his ear against the strange material. No rattles or clogs. Everything seemed to be in perfect working order. When he finally rose, wiping his forehead again, Relara regarded him with an expectant gaze. "Well?" she asked, and he felt a tingle in the air, the subtle presence of her uncanny aura. Parker shifted his weight, uneasy. "Truth is, I can't find anything wrong with your system. The water pressure is perfect, the outflow looks clean, and there's no sign of blockages. Whatever these pipes are made of, it's far more advanced than anything I've ever seen." He paused, meeting her gaze. "So unless there's some hidden issue, I'm not sure there's any actual plumbing repair required." For a second, Relara simply observed him, her luminous eyes flickering with unreadable emotion. Then she gave a low, tinkling laugh, stepping closer so that the warmth of her body nearly brushed against his. "What if," she began, voice dropping to a whisper, "I told you that the pipes weren't really why I called you?" Her words sent a mild shockwave through Parker's body, as if the air itself was charged. He found himself swallowing hard. I, I'm not sure I understand," he stammered, though a part of him suspected exactly what she meant. Rylara was, without a doubt, the most striking being he had ever encountered. Every movement she made radiated an almost hypnotic grace, and that mesmerizing fragrance, like a mix of wildflowers and ozone, was filling his senses in a way that made rational thought increasingly difficult. She gave a slow nod, confirming whatever suspicion lingered in the back of his mind. "On my world," Relara explained, "we enter something called the ascension cycle, akin to what you might call a mating season, where our bodies and minds become, let's say, exceptionally focused on finding a compatible partner. The moment I arrived on Earth, I realized our ways of meeting potential mates aren't so different from some of your customs. However, your technology for matching seems to revolve around functional services. So I followed that logic to find someone skilled and reliable. Your reviews, your ratings, even your photograph on the plumbing website, they indicated you might be a suitable candidate." Parker's jaw nearly hit the floor. His mind scrambled, searching for anything to ground him. "You used an online review site to find a mate?" He might have laughed if he wasn't so stunned. "And you ended up calling me?" Rylara tilted her head, her floating hair brushing the top of his shoulder. "Is that so unusual? It's a form of curated data after all. I needed someone with strong hands, practical knowledge of systems and flows, a certain resourcefulness. Your dedication and reliability appealed to me." He took a step back, his heart drumming a wild rhythm. "Ma'am, I'm truly flattered," he managed, "but I'm just a plumber. I fix leaks and unclog drains. That's it." Even as he spoke, a sliver of curiosity gnawed at him, wondering what it would mean to be chosen for such an otherworldly connection. Relara laughed softly, and the subtle vibrations of her laughter seemed to resonate in Parker's chest. "You underestimate the significance of your work," she said. "On my planet, to skillfully direct the flow of water or other resources is considered a prestigious, even sensual talent. Our entire civilization thrives on balancing energies and channels. Someone who has spent a lifetime perfecting how to fix blockages and maintain vital pathways. Well, in my eyes, that is a rare and precious skill." I, I see," Parker said, though his mind was spinning in 1,000 directions. He remembered how his dad used to joke that plumbers were like doctors for houses, diagnosing and healing the hidden arteries that kept everything running. Was that how Relara saw him? Some kind of caretaker of life-giving flow? The notion filled him with a mixture of pride and bewilderment. He glanced around, realizing the house had grown eerily silent, as if it too was listening to their exchange. Then he noticed something strange. The lights along the walls were pulsing subtly, almost in time with his own thumping heart. "What's going on with your lighting?" he asked, more to break the tension than anything else. "That's the ambient AI," Relara replied. "It responds to our emotional states, adjusting color and brightness accordingly. Right now, it senses heightened anticipation." Her last words dripped with playful insinuation. Parker cleared his throat, feeling the flush in his cheeks deepen. Before he could protest or rationalize, Rylara continued, "On my world, Ascension Cycle is considered a sacred time. We can't simply ignore it. Normally, I would find a partner among my people, but since I'm part of this exchange program, well, I decided to see what Earth had to offer." "Exchange program?" Parker echoed, gripping his tool belt so tightly that his knuckles whitened. He needed something concrete to anchor himself. Rylara nodded. "I'm one of the first from my planet, Cineris, to officially live on Earth. Our governments have arranged a cultural, technological, and biological exchange. I'm here to learn, adapt, and perhaps introduce some of Cineris's innovations to earthly life. But I'm also, personally, at a critical stage in my life cycle. The Ascension calls to me." Parker wished he had a better poker face, but his bewilderment must have been obvious. "So you specifically orchestrated a scenario where your plumbing would appear faulty, just so you could call me over?" A mischievous smile curved across Rolara's emerald lips. "I may have temporarily disrupted the system. No lasting damage, of course. Just enough to bring you here. I was fairly confident you'd be intrigued by the challenge." His mind whirled. Part of him wanted to run back to the safety of his van, pretending none of this had happened. Another part was undeniably attracted. Her alien presence was intoxicating, and the idea of forging a connection that bridged planets felt like something out of a dream. "Well," he ventured cautiously, "now that I'm here, are you expecting me to help you through this ascension cycle?" Rylara's laughter rang out like chimes in a breeze. "Help, yes, but it doesn't have to be tonight if that unsettles you. I know humans prefer a process you call dating, or some version of it. I'm open to that. In fact, I've been researching Earth courtship rituals to better understand how you form emotional bonds." Parker blinked. "You've been researching Earth dating?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. It was hard to imagine how that research might look from her perspective. He pictured Rylara studying streaming services, reading blog posts about first dates, or flipping through videos on how to flirt in multiple languages. The notion was both endearing and surreal. "Yes," she answered, gesturing for him to follow her out of the bathroom. "Your culture's reliance on digital information is truly fascinating. I accessed many articles, video tutorials, even some romantic comedies to piece together the general idea." She led him down a hallway that softly curved, the walls displaying shifting images of Earth landscapes, mountains at sunrise, a beach at twilight, a bustling cityscape, like a living photo gallery. "I realized that real experience is more nuanced, so I decided to combine Earth customs with a bit of Cineris tradition. They emerged into a spacious room that could have been a dining area, except the table looked more like an art installation. The surface was oval and slightly translucent, lit from beneath by soft pastel glows that cycled with the beat of some unheard rhythm. Chairs curved organically out of the floor, made of the same shimmering material. As Parker gawked, Relara clapped her hands in a peculiar cadence, and a small silver orb floated into view. Its surface glinted, rotating gently as it emanated a quiet hum. She spoke a few words in a language Parker couldn't hope to replicate, and the orb began to move around, adjusting settings Parker couldn't see. "What? What's that?" he asked. He found himself oddly entranced by the orb's gentle dance above the table. "That's my housekeeping drone," Relara said. "It's responsible for cleaning, ambiance, minor repairs, things like that. Part of its programming includes emotional intelligence protocols, so it can sense when to provide certain enhancements. Since I set up this dinner as a kind of courtship ritual, it's going to ensure everything is perfectly aligned for our comfort." She cast Parker a warm smile that made his pulse spike. "I know Earth might do it differently, but on Cineris, creating an environment that engages all the senses is part of the courting process." No sooner had she said that Then soft music began playing from discreet speakers hidden somewhere in the walls. The drone drifted above the table, releasing a faint mist that carried a floral scent Parker couldn't identify. Part jasmine, part something else entirely. The lights dimmed to a hue reminiscent of twilight, a pale purple that made Rylara's greenish skin glow more vividly. A gentle warmth seemed to fill the room, like the air had been infused with just the right amount of humidity and temperature to encourage closeness. Parker shifted uncomfortably, though not from displeasure. It all felt intimate, maybe too intimate for someone he'd only known for less than an hour, even if she was an extraordinarily alluring alien. "This is a lot," he confessed, glancing at her. "On Earth, we might go out for coffee or grab a casual dinner. This is like stepping into a romantic fantasy. I'm not even sure what to say." Relara tilted her head slightly, her luminous eyes studying him. "Then let's say nothing for a moment. Let's just sit, share a meal, and see how we feel. And if at any point you want to leave, I won't stop you. I respect that humans have a slower approach to intimacy." He felt torn. Everything about this situation defied normalcy. An alien woman with an emerald glow, a living house that breathed color, a floating housekeeping drone that seemed to be playing the role of a personal matchmaker. And yet, Parker couldn't deny the tug of curiosity pulling him in. Maybe it was the monotony of his life, waking up alone, driving to job after job, returning to a silent apartment, microwaving leftovers in front of the TV. Could he be so desperate for excitement that he plunged headfirst into an interplanetary romance scenario? He hesitated, then found himself guiding one of the translucent chairs back to sit. Rylara settled gracefully into a seat across from him, her hair drifting around her shoulders. With a subtle nod to the drone, she prompted it to begin serving. From a hidden compartment on one side of the room, a series of plates materialized, each bearing what Parker guessed were carefully curated foods. He recognized a few Earth staples, some breadsticks, vegetables like carrots and cucumbers, arranged in oddly suggestive ways. Interspersed among them were small dishes containing alien-looking fruits, shaped like spiraling shells or shimmering orbs. Each had a faint glow as though alive with bioluminescent juice. "I researched Earth's fascination with certain symbolic shapes," Rylara said, her tone academic. "Many of your media sources emphasize phallic imagery when discussing romance, so I included a variety of cylindrical foods." Her eyes flickered with mirth, revealing she was at least partly teasing. "On Cineris, we focus more on the essence of life contained within natural forms, so I combined the two traditions. I hope it doesn't make you uncomfortable." Parker's cheeks warmed. "Well, I can't say I've ever been served so many tube-shaped items on a first meeting," he admitted, picking up one of the breadsticks. "But hey, I appreciate you trying to honor our customs, even if you might have misinterpreted some details." She laughed lightly. "Yes, I suspect your Earth references might not be entirely accurate. Some comedic films led me astray. I'm discovering real-life customs can be quite different from media portrayals." She watched as Parker took a tentative bite of the breadstick. "How is it?" "Not bad," Parker said, surprised. "I was expecting something exotic, but this tastes normal. Did you get these from a local store?" Rylara shook her head. "I synthesized them with a molecular printer. I wanted to ensure they were fresh and safe for your consumption. The produce was grown hydroponically in my greenhouse wing." She nodded toward an adjacent corridor. "It's a hobby of mine, experimenting with earth seeds under Cineris biolight systems." He took another bite, allowing a moment to appreciate the crispness of the breadstick. He still felt the undercurrent of tension in the air, but Rylara wasn't pushing him beyond conversation. Maybe he could handle this. "So you said you wanted to try an Earth-style getting to know each other. Typically that means we talk about our lives, our hobbies, our backgrounds, stuff like that." Her gaze softened. "I'd like that very much. I'd be happy to tell you about Cineris, but I'm more interested in hearing about you. What made you become a plumber? Are you part of a family tradition? Do you enjoy the work?" Parker felt a sense of relief. At least he could handle talking about pipes. Clearing his throat, he began to share the basics. How he grew up in a working-class neighborhood, shadowing his dad on jobs from the time he could hold a wrench, how he admired the quiet heroism of fixing people's homes. As he talked, Rylara listened with an intensity that was rare in his usual world, where most people wanted things fixed and then wanted him out of the house ASAP. Here he had an audience who genuinely seemed enthralled by each detail. He paused, noticing the drone drifting nearby, playing a soft, pleasant melody on what sounded like digital chimes. The lights overhead cycled into a gentle, amber glow, and Rylara leaned forward, resting her chin on her interlaced fingers. In that moment, Parker felt the conversation, and whatever strange connection they were forming, take on a life of its own. Parker soon discovered that dinner with Rylara was less a traditional meal and more a multimedia sensory experience. The glowing table adjusted its light to highlight whichever dish they reached for, while the housekeeping drone spiraled overhead, softly projecting what sounded like a mix between whale calls and jazz saxophone. Occasionally, the drone's algorithm decided something more sensual was called for, switching abruptly to a throbbing bass line that reminded Parker of certain classic R&B ballads. The abrupt musical shifts were both endearing and ridiculous, and he couldn't help but chuckle whenever a new track looped in. Rylara seemed equally amused, especially when he attempted to explain how these songs fit into Earth's history of romance and courtship. She asked him more about his life, and Parker revealed that he was 31 years old, single, and had inherited the plumbing trade from his late father. His dad was the kind of old-school plumber who believed in showing up on time, charging fair prices, and never leaving a house until the leak was sealed. Parker took those lessons to heart. He'd built Nicholson's plumbing solutions on the same honest principles. Yet despite the satisfaction he found in fixing things, he'd be lying if he said he'd never felt trapped. Once in his 20s, he dreamed of traveling the world, maybe studying architecture or mechanical engineering. But between family responsibilities and the simple comfort of routine, he stayed in his hometown. It was safe, if sometimes stifling. R'hllara's eyes glowed sympathetically. She described how, on Cineris, people often spent portions of their younger years exploring quantum fields, traveling to distant planetary outposts, or learning advanced forms of artistry. By the time they reached the ascension cycle, they were expected to have a deeper sense of self. Only then could they choose a mate whose life goals complemented their own. Parker noted that while the tradition seemed somewhat formal, it also made a certain sense. You spend your youth learning who you are and what you want, he mused, so that by the time you settle down, it's with someone who's truly compatible. R'hllara nodded, pleased that he saw the logic. Parker continued nibbling at the mixture of earth vegetables and alien fruits, occasionally braving a bite of something that shimmered like stardust. The taste was tart and strangely effervescent, leaving a tingling sensation on his tongue. What's this called? He asked after one particularly zesty mouthful. A lunaris blossom, R'hllara replied. It's known to heighten sensitivity to subtle energies, our version of a mild stimulant. She quirked an eyebrow. I hope that's acceptable for humans. I tried to select items that wouldn't overwhelm you. Parker noticed a gentle warmth radiating through his body, but it felt more pleasant than alarming. I'm okay, he said, a little more aware, but not in a bad way. For a moment, he let himself enjoy the interplay of flavors, the exotic environment, and the mesmerizing presence of the alien woman across from him. Yet even in the glow of this experience, a small voice nagged in the back of Parker's mind. This was all so fast, an intimate dinner in her breathtaking home, the swirling lights, the subtle pheromones he could practically taste. He wondered if he might be losing his sense of caution. But then again, R'hllara didn't seem manipulative. If anything, she was open, curious, and unexpectedly considerate of his boundaries. After they'd sampled most of the dishes, the conversation took a more mischievous turn. R'hllara leaned forward, her emerald skin seeming to shimmer in the drone's shifting lights. She clasped her hands together and asked, Parker, I'm curious about your world's romantic progression. You said humans often take things slowly, but you must admit there's something resonant between us. Don't you feel it? He exhaled, considering his words carefully. I do feel a connection, he admitted. I'm not sure if it's because you're producing some kind of alien pheromone, here she gave a playful smile, or if it's just that you're incredibly compelling and this is an extraordinary situation. Either way, it's intense. Her gaze flicked toward the drone, which it took its cue to lower the lights, casting the room in dreamy half-shadows. My people do have strong biochemistry during the ascension, she conceded, but it only amplifies what's already there. If you didn't find me appealing on some deeper level, my scent alone wouldn't be enough. Parker nodded. He could believe that. His attraction to her wasn't just physical, even her occasional awkwardness. Buying into Earth's comedic misunderstandings about phallic foods, for instance, was strangely endearing. Despite belonging to different worlds, they shared a curiosity about each other that felt sincere. He reached for his water glass, taking a moment to steady himself before asking the question looming largest in his mind. So, what happens now? What do you envision for the rest of this night? Or beyond? Relara's cheekbones rose in a soft smile. On Sonaris, if two individuals sense a bond, they might align energies to test compatibility further. Here on Earth, you have many stages: holding hands, kissing, more intimate gestures. The ascension, however, heightens my desire for closeness. She paused, lowering her gaze briefly. But I understand if you need more time. I don't want to rush you into something you'd regret. Parker felt his heart pound. It was both exhilarating and terrifying to stand on the brink of an interplanetary romance. His first instinct was to be cautious, to suggest meeting in a neutral setting later, a cafe or a park, to see if this attraction held up under less heady circumstances. But then Relara stood from the table, her hair drifting around her in a halo of soft light, and extended her hand to him. He swallowed hard, hesitating only a moment before placing his calloused hand in hers. Immediately, a gentle static charge seemed to pass between them. The lights along the floor rippled in response, brightening and dimming as though the house itself were excited. "We can start small," she whispered, drawing nearer. "I'd like to experience an Earth custom called a dance. I studied a few examples, but I'm no expert." Parker almost laughed. He was hardly a dancing pro either. His experience didn't go far beyond slow dances at weddings and a handful of tipsy nights at college bars. Still, he let her guide him to an open section of the room. The housekeeping drone sensed the shift and promptly began playing something that sounded suspiciously like a classic love song, complete with low, sultry vocals reminiscent of Earth's old-school R&B greats. They stepped into each other's space, Parker placing a hand lightly on Rylara's waist. Her skin felt alive beneath his touch, a subtle electric hum passing between them. She looped her arms around his neck, and they began to sway in an improvised rhythm that fell somewhere between a slow waltz and a gentle shuffle. He found himself focusing intently on each point of contact, her fingers against the back of his neck, the graceful tilt of her hips, the swirl of her silken hair that occasionally brushed his cheeks. Even the slightest shift of her body felt amplified, tinged with a kind of reverence that he'd never experienced. He wondered if it was the ascension affecting him, or if this moment was simply charged by the strangeness and wonder of connecting with someone from beyond Earth. The housekeeping drone, never shy, transitioned into a new track with more of an upbeat tempo. Relara tried to match the quicker pace, gliding her feet around Parker with surprising coordination. Her floating hair twirled gracefully, catching the colored light as though each strand were a fiber optic filament. Parker did his best to keep up, but it had been ages since he'd attempted anything resembling a real dance. He stumbled a bit, accidentally stepping on the edge of her foot. She winced but laughed it off, and soon they were both giggling at his two left feet routine. They stopped to catch their breath, and Parker realized the drone had changed tracks again, cycling through what sounded like half a dozen romantic songs in quick succession. Some recognizable, some bizarre blends of synthetic pulses and orchestral flourishes. Rylara placed a hand on the swirling lights that composed the wall, and the room brightened enough to let them see each other more clearly. Her expression grew serious. "You asked what happens now. I'll be honest. On Sonaris, if I felt this kind of resonance, we'd move forward rather quickly. But I sense your hesitation. I respect that. It's important we honor both cultures." He pressed his lips together, thinking carefully. "It's not that I don't want." He struggled to articulate his conflicting thoughts. "I mean, I'm definitely attracted to you, and this is like nothing I have ever experienced. It's just, everything's happening as I've had blind dates that were less surprising than this entire night." Rilara nodded, her eyes full of understanding. And I admit that in my eagerness, I may have ignored some of your cultural norms. She gestured to the table with its comedic arrangement of food. When I researched Earth romance, I discovered so many conflicting sources. Some said humans appreciate overt gestures and sensual hints, while others recommended a slow, steady approach. I tried to combine both, but maybe I overdid it. Parker surprised himself by laughing gently. It's okay. I've never been seduced by a mesmerizing alien with a futuristic house AI before, so I'm a little out of my depth too. He caught her gaze, feeling a jolt of awareness at the raw sincerity in her expression. Maybe we can find a balance, learn more about each other, and see if this connection is built on something more than just your ascension cycle. Rylara smiled, the glow of her skin intensifying. I'd like that. Before they could delve any further into that conversation, the hush of the house broke as a persistent knock echoed through the front entrance. Then another, and another. The soft hum of the walls changed into a low, warning tone. Rilara's brow furrowed. Who could be visiting at this hour? Parker glanced at the nearest window, an almost invisible panel in the translucent wall, and felt his stomach lurch. At least 5 plumbing vans idled in front of the house, each bearing a different company name. A small crowd of men in work boots and tool belts stood on Rilara's driveway, their faces marked by something that looked like wonder or longing. One even clutched a bouquet of hardware store flowers, as if guided by an irrational impulse. What on earth? Parker began, but then he remembered Rylara's earlier comment about her species' powerful biochemistry. This is your pheromones, isn't it? You said they affect people in a certain radius? She blanched, her luminous complexion flaring with a brighter color. I might have underestimated the potency in Earth's atmosphere, she confessed. On Sonaris, our settlements are carefully zoned during ascension, so nobody is affected unless they're in close proximity by choice. Here, it appears my signals have spread farther. She peered at the group gathering outside. They must have sensed an irresistible call from someone with plumbing expertise. Parker's mind spun. Of all the improbable situations, this was one he'd never anticipated. An impromptu plumber's convention, drawn by the alien pheromones emanating from Rylara's house. Some of them looked confused, others hopeful, maybe even love-struck. The commotion grew louder as 2 of them knocked more insistently on the door panel, muttering about an emergency leak they needed to fix. Rylara pressed a hand to her temple. I should regulate my output, but it takes a bit of conscious effort to suppress these signals during the ascension. Give me a moment. She closed her eyes, inhaling deeply in a series of measured breaths. The house lights flickered, and a subtle vibration coursed through the walls. After several seconds, Parker noticed that the chorus of men outside seemed less entranced. Some stood blinking in confusion, as though they'd abruptly awakened from a peculiar dream. Still, the problem remained. They'd been summoned here by an invisible beckoning, and a large portion of them looked determined to find some repair work. Parker sighed, running a hand over his face. Well, I guess we better let them know there's no real job here. He stepped toward the entrance, but Rylara placed a gentle hand on his arm. Wait, she said, smirking. If we send them away empty-handed, they might be suspicious or angry. Perhaps I can create a legitimate plumbing issue for them to address, something benign but time-consuming. By the time they're finished, my pheromone levels should have diminished enough that they'll return home safely. You mean sabotage your house? Parker asked, eyebrows shooting up. She gave a half shrug. Only a little. Nothing serious, I promise. Just enough to keep them busy and give us time to handle your own urgent matters in peace. Her eyes gleamed with a playful light, and Parker felt a renewed surge of that electric attraction. Within minutes, Rylara had orchestrated a mild but genuine plumbing riddle for the unsuspecting professionals. She led Parker to a maintenance hatch near the back of the house, behind a panel that disguised some of the more complex pipe systems. With a few elegant swipes of her hand over a floating control pad, she altered the flow through the iridescent tubes, creating a slow, periodic disruption that mimicked pressure fluctuations. A quick sensor reading confirmed that the house's AI recognized a moderate flow instability. That should be enough to keep them tinkering, she said, satisfied. No real damage, of course. And this area is isolated from the rest of the system, so once the job is done, We can revert everything. She opened the front entry, greeting the gathered plumbers with a gracious smile. Parker stood behind her, trying not to be amused by the wide-eyed stares that several of them gave Relara. Even with her pheromone levels dialed down, she still cut a striking figure. Green skin, faintly aglow in the house's alien lighting. One man, wearing a cap emblazoned with Tri-County Plumbing, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we got a call, or, well, we thought we got a call. We're here to fix a leak or something." He looked uncertain, almost as if he weren't sure how he'd driven all the way to Cherry Hill. The others murmured similar confusion, exchanging glances. "You're in luck," Rylara replied smoothly, gesturing for them to follow her toward the back corridor. "I've detected a series of surges in my system. I'd be very grateful if you could each inspect a section of the pipes. My, personal plumber," she glanced at Parker, who nearly choked at the description, "is assisting on another part of the house." That satisfied them for the moment, though Parker noticed a few men still gazing at Rylara with that mix of awe and longing. "Who is this lady?" one whispered. "She's like glowing." Another elbowed him, pointing at the modernist walls. "Look at the tech in here. Never seen pipes like that in my life." They disappeared down the hall in a small cluster, and Parker and Relara exchanged relieved looks. "That was smoother than I expected," he commented. "Let's just hope they stay focused. Otherwise, we might have a small riot on our hands." Relara nodded. "I'll instruct the house AI to provide them with any schematics they need, as well as direct them to the precise location of the issue. It'll be a harmless but intricate puzzle. By the time they're done, any lingering effects from my ascension signals should have worn off." They made their way toward the living room, which Parker now noticed was arranged in concentric circles of plush seating, each piece seamlessly grown from the floor. Holographic images flickered along one wall, displaying rotating views of Earth's major cities and occasionally shifting to what must have been scenic vistas from Cineris. The housekeeping drone hovered in the corner, idly humming a tune that resembled an old Earth jazz standard. Parker let out a long breath, his posture finally relaxing a bit. "So, crisis averted, or at least postponed," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I guess that's step one of dealing with interstellar culture clash." Relara gave a soft laugh, leading him toward a curved couch where they sat side by side. Her presence was comforting, warm. "I'm sorry about all this trouble," she murmured, "but my time on Earth has been more complicated than I expected. I'd imagined a smooth integration, learning local customs, blending in, but the ascension cycle changes everything." He turned to her, meeting those luminous eyes. "Don't apologize. Honestly, before I showed up here, my life was, well, kinda boring. Sure, it's stressful dealing with alien pheromones and a small army of hypnotized plumbers, but it's also the most interesting thing that's happened to me in years." Relara smiled softly. "Your adaptability is impressive. Many in your position would have run the moment they saw someone with green skin." She hesitated, tracing a pattern on the couch's surface that glowed briefly under her touch. "Truthfully, we Cenarians aren't used to such wide variation in emotional responses. We tend to manage our environment to minimize shock. Yet Earth is so freeform, so unpredictable. It's thrilling and also a bit terrifying." Parker considered that. He'd never been off-planet. Heck, he'd barely left the tri-state area. The concept of living in a place so meticulously controlled that even one's mating cycle was planned down to the last detail seemed stifling in its own way. "Maybe we can learn from each other," he said. "Your people value harmony and controlled living spaces. Earth, on the other hand, thrives on chaos and spontaneity. There might be a middle ground we can find together." Relara leaned closer, her voice soft. "I'd like that very much." The hush that descended between them was charged, and Parker felt his pulse quicken. He fought the instinct to jump up or crack a joke, a reflex whenever emotions ran high. Instead, he inhaled, letting Rylara's faint ozone and flower scent wash over him. Before either could close the gap, however, a clamorous noise erupted from somewhere in the depths of the house. A muffled shout, followed by a clang of metal on metal. Parker shot to his feet, tension returning. "Sounds like one of our guests got into trouble," he guessed, hurrying off. Rilara followed suit, her hair streaming behind her like ribbons of light. They arrived at the rear corridor to find two of the visiting plumbers standing knee-deep in what appeared to be swirling, color-shifting liquid. It wasn't exactly water, more like a luminous fluid cycling through shades of pink, blue, and green. One plumber wearing a drenched t-shirt blinked in bewilderment. I just tried to replace a pressure valve and this stuff started gushing out. Rylara bit her lip, looking sheepish. Right, well, I might have forgotten to warn them about the integrated quantum piping. Our fluids sometimes adapt automatically, shifting states depending on the interference they encounter. She stepped forward, calmly closing a hidden latch on the pipe. The flow stopped instantly, leaving only the bizarre puddle behind. Parker couldn't help but admire Rylara's cool composure as she explained away the phenomenon. This is a special solution that helps regulate temperature across multiple zones. She lied smoothly, or perhaps half-truthfully. It's harmless, just visually striking. She assured the soggy plumbers they hadn't caused any damage and offered them a supply of clean towels from a hidden compartment in the wall. Still, the men exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, adjusting his waterlogged belt, mumbled, "Lady, your house is off the charts. I've seen some fancy systems in my day, but nothing like this." Another, calmer now that Rylara's pheromones had less sway, looked around curiously. "What brand is all this? Doesn't look like anything from the States. European import?" Something like that," Parker interjected, stepping in to help. "She's part of a pilot program testing advanced materials, non-disclosure agreements, you know?" He cringed internally at how forced it sounded, but it was the best he could do. The plumber shrugged, seeming satisfied enough not to pry further, though the perplexed expression remained on his face. With the immediate crisis handled, the men continued their attempts to stabilize the flow instability, grateful for more normal water lines once they ventured deeper into the isolated corridor. Parker offered them a hand, slipping into his usual role of calm professional. He explained how to drain the luminous fluid from the localized system and reprime the lines with standard water, so they could test for leaks without risk of a cosmic light show. Rylara stayed back, allowing the men to work without her distracting presence. When everything settled, the plumbers agreed that, yes, it was one of the more peculiar calls they had ever answered, but at least they'd managed to fix something. One joked, "I don't think we'll put this on the company website, though," prompting laughter. Slowly, they began to filter out, returning to their vans with bits of half-remembered confusion about why they'd come in the first place. A residual effect of Rylara's pheromones might still linger in their minds, but it seemed mild enough that they'd rationalize the night away as some unusual but successful job. Finally, the last pair of men left. The driveway cleared, the evening returning to its surreal calm. Parker stood by the door, exhaling a pent-up breath as he watched the taillights of the final van disappear around the corner. When he turned back inside, Rylara was there, leaning against the wall, arms folded, her expression uncertain. "That was a lot," she admitted quietly. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cause such a mess. Earth's open environment is so different from our carefully regulated habitats. I see now why my people rarely travel during ascension." Parker offered a wry smile. "It's okay. Nobody got hurt, and they did get some real plumbing done." He gestured at the corridor where the men had worked. "They'll probably scratch their heads over what they just saw, but at least they're going home with a decent invoice. Might even have a few crazy stories to tell." She tilted her head, her glowing eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and lingering guilt. "That's true. And you handled it gracefully. Are you sure you still want to be here after all this chaos?" He stepped closer, drawn by the subtle spark between them. "If anything, this whole night proved life around you is anything but dull. I can't say I don't have questions or concerns, but yes, I want to stay. I want to figure out what this connection means, alien or not." With that, Rilara's emerald skin glowed a shade brighter, and she reached for his hand. Outside, the hum of traffic faded into the distance, and the luminous corridors of her home seemed to soften and warm, as if inviting them deeper into their shared unknown. They reconvened in the living room, where a gentle luminescence shimmered across the walls. Parker could still feel the residual buzz of adrenaline from the impromptu plumbing crisis, and from his surreal conversation with Rilara. He set his hands on his hips, surveying the space that had become something akin to a cosmic bistro and a plumber's proving ground all in one. You know, he said, turning to meet Rolara's emerald-eyed gaze, I can't decide if tonight has been a dream or some outlandish sci-fi flick. We had dancing robot orbs, glowing pipes, half the plumbing companies in New Jersey at our doorstep. If you told me all this yesterday, I would have called you crazy. Relara offered a small, self-conscious smile. On Cineris, courtship can be a grand spectacle, but it's usually contained. Here, everything is so vast, and I underestimated the side effects of my ascension signals. She paused, searching his face. But you've stayed. We had bow. He studied her a moment, uncertain how to compress all of his jumbled emotions into a neat explanation. I guess because you fascinate me. And yeah, it's been chaotic, but it's also the most alive I've felt in years. For once, I'm not just some plumber dealing with clogged drains and leaking faucets. Tonight, I feel like there might be more waiting for me than just my safe routine. Rylara's smile lit up her face. She stepped closer, tentatively placing a hand on his shoulder. When she spoke, her voice held a vulnerability he hadn't heard before. Our connection is more than happenstance, Parker. During ascension, it's not just about physical urges. There's a deeper resonance, like a frequency that aligns two individuals. If I'm honest, from the moment I heard your voice, I sensed something. I know how that sounds, but Cenarian biology can be intense. He inhaled, recalling the spark he'd felt even over the phone, how her voice alone had seemed to vibrate in his chest. I'm not saying I understand it all, he admitted, but I can't deny feeling drawn to you, like the world tilts whenever you walk into the room. He was relieved to see her expression soften further, as though his words offered solace. All around them, the house adjusted to their mood. The softly curved walls cycled through calming hues, lavender and pale gold, while the housekeeping drone, perhaps exhausted from its earlier antics, drifted quietly near the ceiling. Even the floors, once alive with fractal patterns, had settled into a gentle glow that pulsed in rhythm with their footsteps. On Cineris, Rylara continued, when we acknowledge this kind of bond, we seal it with a gesture of shared energy, something you might call a kiss, but it's more profound than what humans do casually. It creates a lasting entanglement. Parker's heart stumbled at the idea. A voice in his mind warned him to tread carefully. For Rylara's species, a kiss was more than a fleeting sign of affection. It was a binding act. Yet another part of him argued that if he could handle luminous water bursting from quantum pipes, he could handle the repercussions of a deeper connection. He swallowed hard, looking into her swirling eyes. What if we tried it? Just to see if we really do sync up the way you say. Relara exhaled in relief, her hair drifting around her shoulders like a wave in slow motion. She leaned in slowly, and Parker met her halfway, heart thudding with a mix of anticipation and awe. When their lips met, it was unlike any kiss Parker had known. A subtle tingle shot from the point of contact, igniting a chain reaction through every cell of his body. He felt his breath catch as if someone had momentarily shut off gravity. The soft, electric surge rushed between them, and he sensed a peculiar shift, like a gentle bending of the space around them. It was as if the house, the drone, even the humming circuits within the walls, were momentarily focusing on that one intimate moment. Time seemed to stretch. His eyes fluttered shut, and for a heartbeat, he forgot the strangeness of the night, the other plumbers, even his own nagging doubts. All that existed was Relara's warmth, the faint ozone and flower scent that always clung to her, and the reassuring grip of her hand against his shoulder. Then came a deeper vibration, resonating from his chest down to his feet, as though he and Relara were instruments tuned to the same note. He wasn't sure if it was purely emotional or if he'd actually felt some interdimensional effect. Finally, the moment eased, and he drew back, breath quivering. Relara's eyes sparkled, the gold flecks within her irises dancing. She brushed her fingers against his cheek, her voice barely above a whisper. That was a genuine bond. I sense it. Parker nodded, swallowing against a surge of emotion that felt both thrilling and a little scary. Yeah, he croaked, clearing his throat. Something definitely happened. He couldn't help but notice that a faint green glow lingered where their skin touched. If he concentrated, he almost felt a low-level hum between them, like the echo of a handshake that refused to end. The housekeeping drone, perhaps prompted by a spike in the romantic reading, returned to life overhead, chiming in with a gentle melody reminiscent of wind chimes and distant ocean waves. Relara laughed softly, meeting Parker's eyes with a mixture of amusement and apology. It thinks we need an encore, I suppose. My AI is a bit overzealous. He couldn't help but grin. Well, it's better than random R&B tracks at full blast. I'll take this. He took a moment to steady himself, shaking out his limbs as though to release the lingering static. So, this entanglement, does it mean we're locked together permanently? She shook her head, her hair shimmering. Not forcibly so. It means we have a unique connection that transcends casual contact. In Cenarian tradition, it's an invitation to deepen our relationship. Emotional, intellectual, physical. It's not a life sentence, though many who share it do stay together. Her expression turned earnest. If at any point you want to step away, I'll respect that. Parker processed her words, then found himself wanting to close the distance again, to test the feel of that strange, almost magical bond. But a weary sense of reality tugged at him too. It was late, and the intensity of the night was catching up. Maybe we should slow down, he suggested gently. Talk about next steps. Tomorrow, next week, beyond that. Rilara's mouth curved into a soft smile. Yes, of course, we can proceed at your pace. I'm sure you must have a lot of questions, and so do I. They spent the next hour in a calm, almost meditative conversation. Rylara explained more about her life on Cineris, how children were encouraged to experiment with quantum art forms, or to train in specialized vocations like gravitational architecture. Her own focus was theoretical physics, specifically how to manipulate and stabilize wormholes for interstellar travel, a skill Parker could barely wrap his mind around. Yet she spoke about it with the same practical ease he used when describing a clogged garbage disposal. In turn, Parker shared stories of his childhood, helping his dad with weekend plumbing jobs. He remembered the pride he felt the first time he successfully fixed a broken sink on his own. He told her about community college, the free-spirited nights he'd spent tinkering with old cars in his friend's garage. Nothing quite so grand as quantum entanglement, but dear to him all the same. Rylara seemed genuinely fascinated by the everyday aspects of his life, asking curious questions about human family structures, local holiday traditions, and the labyrinthine complexities of New Jersey traffic. At one point, Rylara retrieved a small, translucent orb from a drawer. When she touched its surface, it shimmered and displayed what looked like a holographic collage of Cenarian glyphs and diagrams. She explained it was her personal log, a device to record experiences and observations for future reference. Parker watched in awe as she added a note, likely about this very evening, typing in a script that changed color with each symbol. Before long, the housekeeping drone began dimming the lights, a gentle suggestion that the house was shifting into night mode. I guess your place wants us to wind down, Parker remarked, yawning despite his best efforts to remain alert. It's programmed to sense circadian rhythms, Rylara said, offering a hand to guide him through a softly lit corridor. For me, it helps mimic the day-night cycle of Cineris, but it's also attuned to some of the Earth's standard time metrics. Parker glanced around, taking in the pulsing glow underfoot, the softly humming walls that curved overhead. It struck him how alien yet strangely comforting it had become in the span of a few hours. "Where's your bedroom?" he asked, immediately flushing when he realized how forward that might sound. "I mean, do you sleep in a standard bed or—" She laughed lightly. "I do have a bed, though it's formed from a bioresponsive material. It's quite comfortable, I promise. And I wasn't about to assume you'd stay the night without invitation. But if you'd like to rest, you're welcome to stay. I can arrange a guest chamber." He hesitated, feeling a sudden rush of conflicting desires, wanting to remain close to her, but also wary of forging a bond too strong, too fast. "Maybe a guest room for tonight," he said carefully, "just to keep things from moving at warp speed. I still need time to digest all this." Rylara nodded, respect shining in her eyes. Of course, Vendam. She led him to a room that branched off the main corridor. The door slid open to reveal an oval space where the walls glowed with a gentle turquoise. The centerpiece was a curved platform, resembling a large plush couch more than a traditional mattress, draped with silken sheets that glinted under the soft lighting. If you need anything, just speak aloud. The AI will assist. Feeling equal parts overwhelmed and comforted, Parker thanked her. They lingered at the threshold for a moment, neither quite ready to part. Then Rylara pressed a tender, fleeting kiss to his cheek, a courtesy free of the quantum entanglement rush, and whispered goodnight before the door slid softly closed. Over the next several days, Parker juggled his usual work calls while spending nearly every free moment visiting Rylara's futuristic home. He made sure to call ahead whenever possible. Nobody wanted another army of hypnotized plumbers gathering on her front lawn. In fact, Rylara worked diligently on adjusting her biochemical signals, using meditation and advanced Cenarian mind techniques to dial down the ascension pheromones. Parker sometimes teased her about installing a giant no trespassing alien mating season sign, but the humor only half hid the serious concern they both shared. If Rylara lost focus, she could accidentally broadcast another wave that might draw an even bigger crowd of unsuspecting admirers. Amid the chaos, their relationship blossomed in a way Parker would have never imagined. On a lazy Sunday afternoon, they cooked together. Well, cooked was a loose term, given that Rylara's kitchen involved a molecular printer that conjured perfectly calibrated portions. Parker contributed by bringing fresh ingredients from a local farmer's market. Together, they experimented with blending earth spices and Cenarian produce, resulting in a dish that shimmered like tinsel but tasted like a cross between savory stew and citrus sorbet. Even the housekeeping drone seemed pleased, gliding overhead to analyze each bite's aroma. They also continued exploring each other's fields of expertise. Parker demonstrated the basics of earth plumbing, showing Rylara how the typical drainage and venting systems worked in older buildings, where cast iron pipes might be decades old. Rylara, in turn, dazzled him with simplified demonstrations of quantum field manipulation, opening small, flickering portals that functioned more like illusions than true wormholes but still left Parker gaping. Even though her demonstration was scaled down, he felt the hairs on his arms stand on end every time she toyed with the fabric of space. He couldn't help but joke, "If you can open portals, maybe you can fix the traffic problem on the turnpike by making shortcuts." During one of these sessions, Parker took a call from a longtime customer, an elderly woman whose basement sump pump had failed. He was about to head out alone when Rylara insisted on tagging along, disguising her appearance with a hooded jacket and tinted glasses just in case. Although her complexion still glowed faintly, especially in dimly lit places, they managed to pass her off as someone with an artistic hair dye and a fondness for alternative fashion. Mrs. Winchell, the homeowner, was charmed by Rylara's polite demeanor and was thrilled to have an extra set of somewhat skilled hands. At one point, Rylara asked a question about the pump's pressure threshold that Parker had never considered, suggesting a more efficient arrangement for the inlet check valve. He marveled at how quickly she grasped the fundamentals. As they worked in tandem, Parker realized just how easily Rylara had slipped into his world. She didn't recoil at the damp basement or complain about the musty smell. Instead, she knelt on the concrete floor, cheerfully helping him clamp hoses, measure water levels, and cross-reference the manufacturer's instructions. Despite the strangeness of her background, she possessed a willingness to learn and adapt that put him at ease. Later on the ride back, they laughed about the odd looks Rylara had received from the neighbors, though none of them seemed to suspect she was anything more than a curious friend. Still, Parker felt the weight of what lay ahead. If he planned on being serious with Rylara, how would he explain her to his friends, his extended family, or even random strangers? As open-minded as some people could be, he worried about discrimination, media frenzy, or worse. Yet every time he glanced at her, with her emerald eyes and gentle laugh, all the concerns momentarily receded, replaced by a warm certainty that they were forging something extraordinary. 2 weeks later, Parker found himself gazing around his own apartment with a mixture of amusement and awe. Rylara had started spending more time there, gradually bringing a few essentials: her personal log orb, a few shimmering Cenarian garments, and of course her housekeeping drone. The latter had initially declared Parker's modest living space in dire need of architectural enhancement, scanning every corner and occasionally spritzing his worn furniture with a microfilm that made it glisten like polished marble. More than once, Parker caught the drone attempting to fuse his battered coffee table with a piece of Relara's smooth, bioresponsive decor, a phenomenon that threatened to leave him with half his living room floating 6 inches off the ground. "You sure about this?" he asked one evening, watching as Rylara programmed his old microwave to function on multiple power levels simultaneously. The device hummed with an odd resonance, and Parker half expected a rift in space-time to open inside it. "I appreciate the upgrades, but you know Earth laws of physics don't always mesh well with quantum stuff." Rylara smiled, brushing a tendril of hair off her face. "I'm being careful, and your microwave will still function normally for everyday uses, I promise." She let out a soft laugh. "It'll just heat things a bit faster. Think of it as an eco-friendly improvement." Parker accepted that explanation, grudgingly, if only because he'd grown attached to the creature comforts she introduced. Case in point, the faucets in his bathroom now produced water with adjustable mineral content, thanks to a miniature filtration device adapted from Cenarian technology. His shower, once a drab cubicle with questionable water pressure, now delivered a blissful, spa-like mist. At night, the overhead lights in his bedroom subtly attuned themselves to match his sleep cycle, gradually dimming to lull him into rest. Of course, there were also comedic mishaps. His toaster occasionally beeped in an alien language, refusing to release the bread until he gave a voice command. The living room lamp flickered with rainbow colors whenever the housekeeping drone decided the atmosphere needed more vibrancy. And let's not forget the day he opened the closet to find the vacuum cleaner attempting to merge with a container of Cenarian cleaning gel, resulting in a slick, turquoise goo that smelled like citrus for a week. Yet for all these oddities, Parker found he actually enjoyed the synergy of it. He enjoyed having Rylara greet him when he came home after a long workday, dinner ready on shimmering plates. He enjoyed sharing human TV shows with her, watching the puzzled delight on her face as she took in the comedic hijinks of classic sitcoms. Even his old cat, Marco, had taken a liking to her, curling up on her glowing lap with purrs that resonated in the strange cross-species quiet of the apartment. They didn't label themselves as living together just yet. Relara still kept her futuristic home and had to report occasional progress updates to Cenarian representatives. But more and more, Parker felt they were merging their lives as seamlessly as they were merging Earth and Cenarian tech. Messy, unexpected, yet surprisingly harmonious. One evening, as they lounged on the couch, an odd fusion of earth cushions and translucent Cenarian material, they found themselves discussing the future. Parker had just finished recounting a phone call from his mother, who'd grilled him about why he never brought his mysterious girlfriend around for Sunday pasta night. "I think I'll have to tell her something soon," he admitted with a rueful smile. "If I don't, she might hunt you down herself. She's convinced I'm dating some foreign supermodel. In a way, she's not entirely wrong, just, a different planet altogether." Relara gave him a sympathetic look. "I'm open to meeting your family if that's what you want. I can try to mask my appearance, but the green skin is still noticeable up close. Your mother might suspect something unusual." Parker chewed the inside of his cheek. "Well, I could say you have a rare medical condition that causes skin discoloration. Or we could come clean, explain you're part of an interstellar cultural exchange. It might sound insane, but if we show enough proof, maybe they'll be proud of me for dating someone so accomplished." He shrugged, knowing the latter option carried significant risks. Word could spread, and public reaction to an alien living quietly in suburban New Jersey was anyone's guess. Rylara squeezed his hand. "I'll follow your lead. Cenarian authorities won't be pleased if we go fully public, but they're also aware that personal relationships sometimes necessitate disclosure. We can approach them, request a controlled introduction. Maybe your family can sign a confidentiality agreement if that's how your government handles it." They lapsed into a comfortable silence, leaning against each other. The housekeeping drone did its usual slow circuit, dimming lights and adjusting background music, a whimsical blend of earth jazz and Cenarian harmonic scales. After a moment, Parker spoke again. "What about your parents? If we're serious, Won't they expect to meet me at some point? She nodded, her cheeks taking on a deeper emerald hue that might have been a blush. Yes, it's customary on Cineris for our families to meet any potential bondmate, especially if the ascension resulted in a quantum entanglement. I do weekly holocalls with them, and they keep asking if I've found someone suitable. I've been vague because I wasn't certain how you felt. But if you want me to tell them about us, well, I'd be honored. Parker felt a sudden wave of tenderness. The idea of meeting her parents, other Cenarians, was both thrilling and terrifying. Still, it underscored how real their relationship had become. Let's do it, he said, surprising even himself with the confidence in his voice. I mean, not tomorrow, but soon. I'll talk to my mom and dad, you talk to yours, and we'll figure out a way to make it all work. Rilara's eyes glowed with obvious happiness, her hair drifting up in a soft halo that signaled her delight. I'd like that. And for what it's worth, I think your mother will love me. I've been practicing my Italian phrases. She flashed him a grin, forming her lips around a careful approximation of buonasera. They laughed, the tension of a complicated future diffused by their shared optimism. In that moment, the possibility of bridging worlds, both figuratively and literally, felt more tangible than ever. Life continued in this delicate balance, blending the humdrum task of an earthly plumber with the excitement of an interstellar romance. Parker still had his daily gigs, fixing ancient pipes in historic row homes, troubleshooting leaky faucets in suburban split levels, and even tackling the occasional commercial building's drainage fiasco. The difference was that, at the end of those days, he no longer returned to an empty apartment. Instead, he came home to find Rilara tinkering with new recipes in his kitchen or planting exotic seeds in the makeshift greenhouse she'd set up on his balcony, or just sitting on the couch with Marco, idly browsing channels on a holographic screen she'd installed behind his TV. One late afternoon, Parker arrived with sweat on his brow and sawdust on his overalls. He'd been installing new pipes in a remodel downtown. Rilara greeted him with a bright smile, her hair floating in an enthusiastic wave. "How was work?" she asked, gesturing for the housekeeping drone to fetch him a glass of water. "Tough," he admitted, but he couldn't stop himself from smiling back as he gulped the water. "But I nailed it. The homeowner was so happy he promised me a 5-star review on the website." She beamed. "You deserve it. I've learned so much just by watching you problem solve. You approach plumbing with an artistry that reminds me of our quantum architects." Setting his empty glass down, Parker approached her and cupped her cheek, heart thrumming with affection. "And you bring me a sense of wonder I didn't even know I was missing." He leaned in, pressing a gentle kiss to her lips. The familiar electric tingle passed between them, that hum of quantum resonance that had become both comforting and exhilarating. In response, the housekeeping drone, forever the exuberant romantic, launched into a medley of Earth love songs, complete with mild strobe lighting. Parker chuckled, raising a brow at Rylara. "I thought you reprogrammed it to tone down the theatrics." She shrugged playfully, her eyes dancing with color. "It seems your Earth music library has enthralled it." They settled on the couch together, letting the drone finish its serenade. Eventually, it glided away, satisfied it had set the proper atmosphere. In the quiet that followed, Parker felt the contours of Rylara's presence pressed against his side, the warmth of her body, the silken texture of her skin. He found himself marveling again at how improbable it all was. A plumber and a quantum physicist from different planets, forging a life that somehow fit like two pieces of a puzzle. "Do you think we'll ever go to Cineris?" he asked, voicing a thought he'd been harboring. "I mean, for a visit, so I can see your world." Rilar's expression turned wistful. "I hope so. Right now, the exchange protocols are strict. Only certain individuals can travel, and only for defined purposes. But as more of us integrate, we'll push for broader cultural visas. I'd love to show you the Starlight Gardens, the crystal reefs, our floating cities. It's beautiful in ways even I can't adequately describe." He squeezed her hand. "Then let's keep building here, together, until that day comes." The housekeeping drone dimmed the lights in a silent crescendo, as though offering its gentle blessing. And as Parker Nicholson settled against the luminous warmth of his Cenarian partner, he finally believed that some bridges, those built on trust, curiosity, and affection, could span galaxies. From one unexpected phone call to interstellar family introductions, our story proves that love can thrive in the most improbable circumstances. I've shared Parker's personal journey not just to entertain, but to highlight how open-mindedness and collaboration can unite two very different worlds. Whether it's mending a quantum pipe or negotiating cultural norms, what matters most is the bond they've forged, built on empathy, curiosity, and a dash of cosmic humor. If you followed this adventure all the way through, thank you for your time and imagination. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Would you welcome an alien house guest into your life, especially one with singing plumbing? Share your comments, questions, and ideas down below, and let's keep the discussion flowing.